Hello, everyone. Once again, you can all be seated, those of you that are standing. And once again, welcome to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course taking place here in Abilene, Texas, and of course going throughout the entire world. And for everyone, once again, if you're wondering what book we're in the junior high character unit. It's the junior high character unit. It's the first of 5 in what's known as our intermediate series. And you can download the book. The PDF book is right there on the Facebook page that we're streaming on right now. So you can go through this along with us. And the book you'll download will be the teacher's manual. That will have all of the notes and the lesson plans and everything that you'll need to get started. And then, of course, you'll add a lot of your own notes in with that to help you and guide you into teaching your classes and to educating and helping your students. So once again, we're going to be here in chapter 6, and we're going to do a quick review of what David covered the last class. And of course, if you turn back, because this is another procedure that we've talked about in the beginning, that there's some pages that they're really not in the procedures. So you have to go through the procedures and read them ahead of time, or else you'll get caught off guard with what you're covering. So if you'll turn over to LP6D, that's one of the gray tab pages in chapter 6, and of course that's at the beginning of each chapter that we have the lesson plan and the teacher's manuals. And we're in procedure 5. And of course it says, tell students that they have explored the value of positive leadership within society, and they can now focus on developing themselves as positive leaders. And as we go through the pages tonight, we'll cover how we're building on parts of the book we've already covered before. And if you aren't aware or haven't seen the classes that we've covered before, they're all there on your Facebook page, and you can go back and watch from the very beginning, and you can see where these pages were covered and how one step builds upon another, one lesson builds upon another. It tells us to explain to students that anyone can learn the skills needed to be a positive and effective leader. And then, of course, it tells us to have students turn to page 129, and we're going to review some of these pages and read section entitled, There is a Leader in You. Now, notice really quickly before we turn, when you get to the next procedure, notice there in the bold print, it says, Be a Positive Leader on pages 131. So notice we're from page 129 to 131. So we'll want to make sure that we cover page 130 with procedure 5, because by the time we get to procedure 6, we're already at page 131. So that's just so you can take note, and you'll always find things like that in the lesson plans, and that, of course, you'll have to be aware of those when you're covering them so they will all go together and have continuity. Now, we're going to turn over, when you turn over here, we're going to do a quick review, then we'll get to page 129, but David covered, of course, starting with the deciding factor. We want these things fresh in our mind for what we're going to go over tonight. So we're going to briefly recover. There at the very top of the page on 126, David told us about that we are literally surrounded by leaders. In every activity, organization, town, and nation, there are leaders. So there's leaders all around us. And if you look down to the next paragraph, he let us know that you can always tell a positive leader from a negative one by the outcome of their actions, belief, and ideology. So the outcome, what was the end result of the ideas that they carried forth? And notice he let us know that negative leaders lack integrity. And for your notes, if you don't already have it, of course, he told us to turn over to page 18, and that's where we have the definition of integrity. And it tells us there on page 18 that integrity is the end result of internalizing positive character traits that can be clearly seen in your actions and attitudes, and of course that is called integrity. Now, continuing on in that same paragraph there on page 127, it says they don't exemplify to their followers the importance of achieving a positive moral character and the benefit of attaining positive goals. So they don't actually show these things to those they're leading, teaching, and guiding. And once again, remember what we've talked about, who are leaders and teachers, as we're talking about learning to teach our children here in classes, whether they're junior high. Once again, these are used with adults. These are used in all situations, these books, and they can be used to a great benefit. But we always want to remember that this benefit of attaining positive goals, everyone has goals from the time they enter school even before school. When you go to school on your first day going to school, you always have an idea of what you want to do, who you want to meet, what you want to see. Well, those are goals also. As we get older, our goals kind of get more grand, they get bigger, and sometimes they can become unrealistic. Well, as we continue to read here on the very next paragraph, positive leaders, well, they're people of integrity, and they maintain and demonstrate their positive moral character consistently through their beliefs, attitudes, and actions. Now, keep that in mind when talking about a positive leader and also us having goals and the things that we want to achieve in life, because sometimes, as parents do, when you say, I want to do this, well, you can do that, but you're going to have to do this, 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 and this. Sometimes leaders, teachers, guides, they're there to give us direction when we're kind of going out of the way. A negative leader won't give you those directions, but a positive leader will. So keep that in mind as we go through this tonight, because notice the very last paragraph here, the deciding factor between a positive and negative leader is the same thing that decides the qualities, either positively or negatively, of all people. So the deciding factor is the same, but it divides, whether they always seek to remember the saying that we have here, it brings no harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. Of course, morality. And looking over to page 128, he identified some leadership styles, and he identified the difference between positive and negative leaders that have been throughout our history. And, and always consider positive leaders have an effect on society in a positive way, but it doesn't mean that they have an ending result that was positive. Because if you notice, both positive leaders that David brought to us last class, they were both assassinated. So even though they taught positive things, they stood for positive things, didn't mean society readily accepted what it is that they were teaching or what they were offering. And then on page 129, he let us know that there's a leader in you, and that's individualizing this, telling all of us. And of course, he started out by saying, of course, not everyone will become a government, community, or religious leader, but in every person's life, there will be opportunities to lead. And once again, he let us know, have you ever considered that your teacher is a leader? And that's something we always have to take. For us as teachers, we have to always remember that what we say and what we do, we're always teaching, guiding, giving direction through comment or through action. And of course, as students, which we all are still students, no matter how old we are, a teacher never quits learning. That's one thing in the Peaceful Solution. A teacher never quits coming to class. You're always coming to class with the other teachers, and this learning process never stops. You're always looking, because one goal of a Peaceful Solution instructor is always trying to find a better way to explain things, a better example to offer someone. And whenever you're teaching globally, as the Peaceful Solution does, there's challenges that might be here in Abilene, Texas, but they're very different challenges that would be in St. Louis, Missouri, which is now the #1 ranking city for murder in the United States. Or you go to another city where problems could be worse. Or you run into situations where you have extreme poverty, where people have to scrape for food, or places in Africa where you walk 3 miles for water. All of these things help us with our becoming teachers and then students and also teachers. We never grow out of being a student, even when we become a teacher. So that ability to lead requires the ability to follow. And that's what we're going to cover tonight as we move forward with a little bit more review. And then we'll get into something very important. And always remember that in the Peaceful Solution. A person in the Peaceful Solution that is able to teach must always be willing to follow. Otherwise, you can't be a positive teacher, because we're always going to need guidance and instruction. Society is a very fast-paced, changing society. When you look at the challenges that lie ahead, who can guess what lies ahead when you look back 15 years and you start thinking about what we went through 15, 20, 30 years ago? If you're an adult, think about what you went through as a child, growing up, and then look at what children go through today. Look at how technology has changed life drastically through basic things like the internet. Look at how a COVID pandemic has changed society enormously from what we once knew, where virtual classes have become the kind of the go-to thing, but now people don't really know how well they work. Well, we know that any education can work if you put forth a positive program. So continuing on here, at the very bottom, the last paragraph on this page, notice it said one of the keys to learning how to lead is to maintain your positive character. And David talked about how, he had cars that he has mechanics to work on and maintain to keep them running, and how he compared character to being like a car and how you have to keep up with it. If something starts breaking, you got to fix it, or you have basic maintenance that always has to be done. That basic maintenance is education, and always going through and reminding ourselves of these things so that they don't slip from our minds. And of course, comparing that to character and seeing the importance of doing it. It says you might suddenly find yourself in a situation where everyone else is doing the wrong thing. Knowing how to be a positive leader can help you get yourself and others out of a bad situation. Sometimes making a difference means taking the initiative and having the courage to stand up for what is right. You never know when, through your positive leadership, you might encourage someone else to make a right choice. And that's where we're going to be tonight, with all of those things in mind, is this making a right choice. And of course, being here on page 130, we're going to start the section entitled, A Potential Leader Won't Mind Being Trained. So a potential leader won't mind being trained. And that's one thing that we always have to keep in mind. If we ever get to the point where we think we know everything, that's when we've kind of quit doing our part to benefit society, because there's so much to learn through everyday situations. If we knew everything, we would have a perfect world. We wouldn't have negative things in society. If we knew everything, we would have perfect lives, perfect families. Nothing would be wrong. So obviously, we all still have a lot to learn, and a positive leader will always be willing to take on that challenge. So starting off here, it says, not a born leader? Well, join the crowd. Most people aren't either. But don't let that discourage you from learning how to lead. There are many things that we are born not knowing how to do, such as reading, writing, or even riding a bike. Learning these skills might have been difficult at first, but you not only learn how to do them, you learn how to do them well. And that's something we'll get into. If you remember, certain sections we covered with becoming a VIP and what exactly a skill is and why we're even going through this book to begin with. Looking down here to the next paragraph, notice it says, leading others requires character, personality, and skills. So all three things are required to be a leader. But to be the very best, you must develop a positive character and a harmless, helpful personality. Now, if you turn back over all the way back to the very beginning in lesson plan 1A, very beginning, this is where we started, here in 1A. And it was the introduction to the unit. And if you look here, it's at the, third paragraph. The third paragraph, the second one from the bottom there. And it says, if you were to poll what students want for their future, that's their goals, none of them would say they want to be the victim of a school shooting or to contract HIV or a host of other sexually transmitted diseases that cripple or kill. On the contrary, they would say that they have hopes and dreams. Once again, they have goals to pursue the career of their choice, to start their families of their own. That requires leadership. Or to succeed in a healthy, joyous life. But notice, it's our responsibility as educators. So this is something we're responsible for as educators, parents, and role models. Notice, is to give our children the skills and knowledge to resist negative influences and to attain a positive moral character to succeed in life. So as a parent, as a teacher, as a guardian, that is what we're actually supposed to be doing, is giving these things to our children. Now, it's very easy to give your child a bike. It's very easy to give your child a video game, to give your child something that they can hold in their hand. And if you give them something they can hold in their hand compared as to giving them a book, most children would prefer the video game than the book. But you have to look, everything that you give them, everything you offer them, What benefit are you giving them to help them through life, to guide them through life? Because life's going to bring challenges. Ignoring them or putting the challenges off or hoping they won't come until they're older doesn't stop the challenges from coming. And they're going to come in each and every person's life, not just a child, but as leaders, as parents, as guardians, and as teachers. This is what the peaceful solution is. It's a way of giving them the skills through practice. Remember that value, imitate, practice. Look over to page 73. If you don't have it in your notes, write that down. And if you've never been able to join us up until yet, you'll want this, because this is how we develop the skills and make them a habit. And here on page 73, notice it's called the steps to a moral character. And it says that there are 3 steps toward obtaining a moral character. These steps, when perfected, can make you a VIP, a very important person. And of course, notice here it tells us that we need to consider what is important in our life and how can influence affect what you value and how you can achieve your values. And of course, values, if you're right there for your notes, can be found on page 6. That's something you deem important. One thing all of us have to deem important, whether we live in South Texas, whether we live in Minnesota, or Kentucky, or North Carolina, or California, all of these states we're seeing in the news, there's a lot of challenges taking place not only in the United States, but in every country. And the only way that we can step up to the challenge that's coming forth is to develop skills to learn how to better handle these situations. It's a very devastating thing when we see in society, and you can divide society by leadership. When we vote for president, so to speak, who is supposed to be the leader of the free world, the representative, the most powerful leader in the world. And when you look at that, think of the qualifications that the citizens expect of their leader. Divided almost 50-50 this last time. And none of them were really, everybody says, well, I want to vote for a moral person, but morality is kind of cast out whenever elections come along. It's more of a what can you do for me kind of situation instead of something based on morality. So when we look at someone that we want to imitate, someone that we can value, you have to find someone that's promoting morality. You have to find someone that's promoting making decisions that harm no one, that doesn't harm the environment and doesn't cause you to harm yourself. And that takes some examination to do. And it's a sad thing, but it's hard to find that in a society today. There's people out there that want to be that way and that are striving to be that way. And that's why the peaceful solution has been created to help us to take on this character of valuing first, valuing what is important in this positive influence in affecting other people. And then, of course, is to imitate, to take or to follow, to be a model, to be a role model. And notice it says here on page 73, to be aware of what and who you imitate. Imitating negative behaviors and negative people who act immorally mean that you are adopting negative character traits. For example, the main character in a popular movie always gets even when someone wrongs him. Remember, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Now, if you watch television, when you see something that's tragic occur, where someone dies, and we're not here to blame whether it be law enforcement or people conducting themselves in an inappropriate manner. Obviously, we all need some training, and I think everybody agrees with that. We all need better training on how to make better decisions. But when someone dies of a devastating death, burning the city down is not an answer. Destroying the city is not an answer. That's not taking the role of a positive leader, because you notice everybody comes out to lead when these riots come forth. There's always someone that wants to lead. And there's some people that, of course, want to lead to try to find a better solution. Well, when we imitate these certain character traits, if we go out and we riot and we burn the city down, sometimes you'll learn from the peaceful solution through the prison program. Because the people that you're following there, whenever the police come, people turn on people very quickly. These leaders that you wanted to follow very quickly want to give you all the credit for everything that took place. And they won't know credit whatsoever. But you also have to remember this imitating behavior as we've seen in the news here recently, caused a 7-year-old little girl who was sitting in a car with her father to be shot 4 times as she just sat in the car with her father, but the car was caught in a drive-by shooting. Now think about, where did that mentality come from, and who are they imitating? What caused that thought to come into their mind and let that action take place to where a 7-year-old little girl lost her life due to these things? So once again, we have to be careful what we imitate. But now once we find something that's important and we know it doesn't bring harm, we value that, that's what we want to imitate. And once we have that down, we have to practice, practice, practice. As it says here, for P equals practice, make moral choices and practice beneficial behavior. Notice that will build your character. Once again, it's building, it's developing. Consistently practicing a right behavior makes it a habit, and it becomes a part of your character. So once again, that's what we're looking at doing here, and learning to become a positive leader. We're looking to develop, we're looking to build, and of course, these skills are what we're looking to make stronger, like a muscle. You know, if you can compare it to lifting weights, that would be fine. But the more you do it, the better it becomes. The more we put it into action, the better we become at it. And then turning back here, of course, to page 130, we were in the second paragraph, and we were talking about these skills that we're developing, and of course, taking on this role modeling of becoming a very important person. Now, it says you already know here in the second paragraph, is the second sentence, you already know that you must maintain and develop a positive character on a daily basis. So the only way that you know this is that you've been covering the first 5 chapters that went along with the 6th chapter. And that's what we're saying here, is that you already know that you must maintain and develop a positive character on a daily basis, because everything, when you look at this book and you think, well, I'll skip to the best parts, all of these are the best parts. And all of these right here are really needed to understand what we're saying in this one sentence, because it explained, if you go back through the classes, you'll see the teachers give examples of things that are taking place presently in society, and they explain the words that are used and give different scenarios that take place and how these things can affect. You'll hear personal testimony to how they made changes. So those are the things that we're saying are very important. And as teachers, we always kind of see the problem, and we want to turn to our children and say, right here, a potential leader won't mind being trained. Well, they have to have that foundation, other than looking at them and saying a potential leader will listen to what I say. We need all of the things that come before that to give them an idea about what we're honing those skills for. So once again, it says, as for skills, well, you can learn the skills relevant to leadership in the same way you learn all of your other skills. Once again, it's practice, practice, practice. And that comes from page 73 of the Value, Imitate, Practice. Now, continuing on here, it says, here are a few simple steps to keep in mind. 1, set your mind in advance that you can be a positive leader. And if you don't have the note there, write down page 80, because page 80 is where we learned to set our mind in advance. And if you turn over there very quickly, just so we can keep these things together, so you want to write page 80 there beside the first step that it gives us. And going back to page 80, it of course starts out by saying here on page 80, have you ever heard the saying, it's all in your head? Most people say it sarcastically, but there's some truth to it. Whether you're aware of it or not, every action begins with a thought. And that's the part that gets us prepared. That's how we set our mind in advance, by realizing everything we do starts with a thought. Setting your mind in advance to maintain your positive character traits begins by first considering just how important it is to have a moral character, to be trusted, admired, respected, and known as an honest, reliable, compassionate person is something you should want. But once again, we're putting in our minds, we're making ourselves aware of the things that we say, the things that we do, this thought process. If we can start processing the outcomes of what we're going to do before we do them, we can actually become a better leader. A leader has to consider what they're saying before they say it. They have to consider the effects it's going to have on someone before the words leave their mouth. It's very hard. And we've all done it to say things that we would love to be able to take back a couple minutes, delete that section out of life, and start over again, because now we see the outcome of what we've done, and we want to go back and take that away. You know, we gave an example of how we go into schools and we'll do the aluminum foil or the notebook paper. And I'm telling you, I've never seen students work so hard to try to get those wrinkles out. But life is more valuable than a piece of notebook paper, but it sure gets the point across that it's really hard to get that done. And then, of course, there on page 80, if you write down page 90, that's where we talked about reputation. We're not going to go there tonight, but you can write that down so when you're teaching, you can just flip back and forth until you familiarize yourself with the book enough, and then you'll realize how all of these pieces of the puzzle, they all fit together. And if we skip one piece that's in the center, you can't get the puzzle together. It's very much needed. You'll notice I got a big hole here in my puzzle and something doesn't look right. So once again, all of these things going together. Going back to page 130, we talked about setting our mind in advance, and that's knowing that every action begins with a thought. Every action begins with a thought, and we're going to consider the outcome of what we're doing, what we're saying, how we're conducting ourselves. Now, here with the second step, it says we need to value how learning to lead can help you maintain a positive character. So value how learning to lead. Well, why would valuing learning to lead, why would you deem that to be important? Well, you have to consider that the person we're talking to here has went through everything in the book thus far, and they have their mindset that they don't want to cause harm to someone else, themselves, or the environment. They don't want to do things that tear people down or demoralize people. They want to do things that lift people up. As a leader, you have to give people the confidence they don't have. You have to give people the belief in themselves. As remember the hope page 117 that we covered, we have to give them hope, because that's what the Peaceful Solution does. And that is our goals when we go into schools, when we go into classrooms, when we go into auditoriums. Our goal is that we want to give every student hope that they can make a better life for themselves and everyone that's around them. No matter what situation they're in, no matter what their family life might be, they can make a difference. They can change the outcomes of what life brings them. We never have to be satisfied with negative things. If we have negative things going on in our lives, in fact, we'll cover that shortly about never giving up and quitting, because when you're satisfied with the negative, that's when you kind of just give up. That's when you don't see the value in your own life. That's when you don't consider your actions or the actions that you affect other people with. And that's what we see here in the next step is don't quit trying. Don't quit trying. Look over to page 85, because page 85 does a great job of letting us know about the curveballs and the pitfalls that we're all going to experience these in life. And we're all going to have to meet up to the challenges. You know, leaders go through many, many challenges. And the one leader that I would give an example to is the author of The Peaceful Solution. When you look at the challenges, and if you are familiar with the challenges that he went through in putting this book together, and all of the books, a whole curricula, you know, from elementary, pre-K to elementary, all the way up through junior high and to high school, and then parenting and the workplace manuals. There was a lot of challenges because not everybody wants to come out and say the right thing. It doesn't pay much money to do the right thing. In fact, character education, the rewards you get from character education is society becomes better. That's the rewards that comes from character education. It's not measured in monetary, even though it can be accomplished. Destruction and theft and all of those things can be rid of. Well, it's a very challenging thing, and it can be easy to give up. But, of course, as he pushed forth, and a whole team that he established has pushed forth with getting these books to every nation in the world. And some of the nations are difficult to get into. Getting things sent out today is a challenge. Getting classes across the world has become easier due to technology, as we have people watching all around the world right now. But if we would have given up, if the author would have given up and said, well, we'll just use this here in the state of Texas, we'll never be able to get it out anywhere else. Think of the people that's watching in Africa, South America, Europe, and all over the other parts of the world that would never have been able to get this. But, of course, there's always a push to help everyone. And these curveballs and pitfalls we all go through. No matter where you live, no matter what nation you're in, we all suffer from these obstacles that arise in our lives. And here at the very top of the page, it says, curveballs and pitfalls are unexpected situations that can test your resolve to maintain a positive character. They come up when you least expect them and catch you off guard. Suddenly you can find yourself in the middle of a bad scene, unprepared to deal with a situation that could lead you to making a bad choice that you will later regret. Now, I want to give you an example of a bad choice that I was kind of explained when I was in another country just a few months ago. And it was a person that was a police officer, and they're no longer a police officer in this country they're in. And they were telling me that they risk their lives every day. They combat the cartel, and they make about $90 a week, which is really decent pay for that country, $90 US a week. And he was explaining to me, he said, I want to tell you how easy it is to become a bad cop. When someone who is your supervisor for the police force says, take this bag located at this house, take it across town, drop it off at this house. Make sure you put it in the car, the police car, and take it with you. Well, why? No one's going to stop you. No one's going to question you. And he said, they told me that they'll pay me $100 US to take that bag from this spot to this spot. In 1 hour, I can make more than I make working all week. So I took the bag and I took it from here to here. And I asked, I said, what was in the bag? He said, you don't ask. You just do. They're paying you to drop off a bag. They're not paying you to know what's in the bag. And I said, well, how do you become a bad cop? He said, you become a bad cop whenever it comes out that you're trafficking drugs and they need someone to put it on. That was the money they paid you, so they could have somebody to blame it on when the time comes. So what do you do now? He said, now I just scrape. I try to find a job. I'll never get a job in the police force. That's a high-paying job down here. I can't get a job as a teacher because I'm classified as a drug dealer now. Did you ever know what was in the bag? No. I just did what I was told because it became easy. I literally was making more in an hour than I can make in a week. And you think about things like that, and that's very enticing for a person when you're in a country. There's no real way to get ahead financially, and all of a sudden, wow, I can double my pay and only add one more hour to it. And the key to it is don't ask questions. Well, the peaceful solution tells you always ask questions. You know, if someone asks you to do something, even if it's a leader that comes to you, if you think it could be something that's negative, there's nothing wrong with asking, because a positive leader is going to give you some security of mind. A positive leader is going to let you know, hey, well, this is the goal we're working toward. A negative leader will be the kind of person, don't worry about what you're doing, just do what you're told. And when I say do what you're told, that means they give you no foundation to stand on. You have no idea what the goal is. All you know is to get this bag from here to here. Now, there's some situations where a positive leader will tell you, hey, grab that and go and hurry up and get there with it and get it done quick. Well, if you think you're trafficking drugs, of course, that wouldn't be a positive leader. But as I asked this cop, I said, did you ever think that there was something bad you were doing? He said, I knew there was something bad I was doing because they were paying me more than I worked a whole week. They paid me more to deliver that bag. He said, deep down inside, I knew what I was doing was wrong. I just didn't want to face. I kept telling myself, if I didn't know, then it's okay. Well, positive leaders will always give you instructions and guide you and lead you. They'll always give you that sense of security of what you're doing is doing the right thing. They won't lead you into these bad scenes. And positive leaders always want to help you increase in this, avoiding these curveballs and pitfalls. If you look down to the third paragraph, it says the first step in handling curveballs and pitfalls is to plan for them. Once again, that's setting your mind in advance. You already have learned the value of setting your mind in advance. You could imagine some of the unexpected situations that you might encounter and plan practical ways to deal with them. This is called hypothetical reasoning. In other words, what are some typical situations that are likely to occur? What could you say or do that will help you to maintain your positive character? And notice the goal is always maintaining this positive character. Well, maintaining your character will sometimes require courage. And for the definition of courage, if you don't have it, just right up above that, page 29, because that's where we have the definition of courage. And you don't have to turn there, but I'll turn there and read it for you real quick just so you understand what we're saying here. And of course, on page 29, the definition of courageous is the act of doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. So the act of doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. So once again, back here on page 85, maintaining your character will sometimes require courage. So the act of doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. Having knowledge, wisdom, and a plan will give you the confidence you need to stand your ground. Well, that's what a positive leader is going to give you. They're going to give you knowledge, they're going to give you wisdom, and that will give a plan, and that's going to be the confidence that you need to stand on. That's that foundation a positive leader will give all of us when these curveballs and these pitfalls arise. But a negative leader is just going to leave you stranded. They don't offer you any substance to base yourself on when you're making these decisions. And that's one thing we always have to look to, because the peaceful solution is really firm, I guess I could say, strongly established, and always helping people make the right choices, and also realizing that us ourselves as teachers need this guidance also. We need it. I need it. You need it. We all need it. And with everyone working together, that's when we actually become a better team, because we're helping each other to eliminate all of the negative things that we encompass in our lives. So back here to page 130, after we set our minds, don't quit trying. And write down page 117 also, and read the whole page when you have time to do that, because once again, that's the hope chapter. If you ever lose hope, life kind of becomes very dull and unrewarding. We always have to have hope. So here on page 30, once again, it says, if you have ever experienced being in a leadership position, for instance, being the class leader or club president, then you are well aware of how much responsibility it takes to be a leader. And one thing you can write down beside this, one of the responsibilities to be a leader is to be educated, to be guided, to be trained. When you think about being trained, you can use the word taught, guided, instructed, and the last but not least, the dirtiest of all words, right? Corrected. A leader won't mind being corrected, because, as a leader, you have to be a student, right? That's what we said earlier. We have to be students to be leaders. And if we're a leader, that means we're a student. That means we have teachers. And our teachers are there to help guide us and correct us. And when we, of course, look out at our students and think about this role of leadership as we go through school, and then, teachers go to college, and then they go to college to become teachers, so now they're in that leadership position. There was no magical pixie dust that was dumped on them on the way that sent them back into school. It said, "Poof, now you're a leader." And we've seen and experienced where teachers have said, especially down in Laredo, Texas, there was one during a ceremony we had down there, a award ceremony, where she made the comment she had been through 4 years of college, and they never, through her 4 years, the Peaceful Solution offered her more on how to deal with students from an emotional standpoint and to give encouragement than 4 years of college ever offered. They kind of give her tips on how to teach someone to read, how to teach someone to do this, or specifically what she went to college for, that topic. But they didn't give her these very foundational parts, which, if we can't get someone's mindset on positive character, everything else comes to nothing. Everything else truly comes to nothing if a person's not going to embrace life with the desire to be a positive person. So continuing on, it says, remember, there are both positive and negative leaders. And David gave us some examples of those that we can see throughout history, but we can see them in our life right now, every day. And you can look in society, and I challenge you to do this. Look in society and look at what society calls a positive and negative leader. If you live in certain countries, like if you live in the United States, when you look at Russia and China right now, I'm hearing they're negative leaders. But if you're in China, you're hearing that the United States has negative leaders. If you're in the United States, Iran has negative leaders. If you're in Iran, the United States has negative leaders. So everybody's looking at this from a standpoint of we're not really in unity with what we're defining as a positive and negative leader. Well, you can first start by, what are we doing to build society or to tear it down? And the peaceful solution has always stood the ground, and we'll get to the sections where, huge events take place where leaders are supposed to rise to the occasion. September the 11th, I think everyone can remember President Bush standing there on 9/11 with a firefighter wrapped around his arm, and he gave a speech about how the people that knocked these buildings will soon hear from all of us soon, that knocked these buildings down would soon hear from all of us soon. And he was considered a great leader for that speech he gave. And I'm sure he had great intentions. But 21 years later, think about how much difference have we made, and are we less scared of having a terrorist attack now than what we were before? Because now when you watch the news, whether it be you can be a CNN person, a Fox News person, an MSNBC person, you can be all of these all of these flavors of news that they have out there, and you're hearing some pretty devastating things that they're talking about in society that's much worse than knocking 2 buildings down. And these are leaders that are really kind of butting heads. Well, if we want to make a difference, the question becomes first, do you really think we can make a difference? Do you think you can make a difference? Well, we have to try. We have to try. If we don't try, then the answer is no. We gave up. And the third thing we read there was don't quit. If we don't give up, how can we make a difference? Well, the author of The Peaceful Solution, let's read this next sentence, and the next 2 sentences, and we'll see what the author has shown us through his endurance. It says, what category does your leadership style fall into, positive or negative? Well, notice here, do you motivate others to apply their positive character traits to achieve their goals? Consider the author of The Peaceful Solution. When he first started writing The Peaceful Solution and put together a team that helped put these pieces of the puzzle together, he didn't have to do that. And the people that joined in with him didn't have to do that. And back then, it was a very small group that came together to put these things into what we see today. Now, that work that was many years ago has spread to every country in the United States. And now it's being translated into many different languages throughout the world, many different countries in the world. The United States is only one. But many countries throughout the world, and now it's going into different languages. And when you think about the desire that people have, once they hear it, they want it. And we've been to different countries. We've traveled to many different countries, and we've never had anyone say, nah, we don't want that. We've had people beg us to stay. We've had people want us to set up schools in their countries. We've had people send their people to the headquarters here in Abilene to have teachers train so they could come back to their countries. But no one's ever said, nah, that's not for me. No one. And we're talking about this transcends all religions when you bring up religious leaders. This transcends all choices of political party. It doesn't matter what party they're in or where they're from. They all have seen this leadership and teaching ability that's been offered through the Peaceful Solution, and they've desired it. Now, notice also the next thing. Do you treat those who look to you for guidance with respect and compassion? And that's one thing the Peaceful Solution offers to the whole world. Respect. It teaches to have care, consideration, and concern, which is respect through all people, through all life. And then, of course, having compassion. Let's turn over to page, I think it's on page 29 also. It's right there with courageous, compassionate. Yeah, on page 29, you can write for your notes. The definition of respect is on page 14, and the definition for compassion or compassionate is on page 29. And compassionate, it says to care about the needs of others, to care about the needs of others. And then, of course, on page 14, the definition of respect is to value others as important as yourself and to allow that to show through your actions and attitudes. So it's showing that you have true compassion. And I tell you, when you look out in society, there's things you see that can break your heart. That it can really bother you. There's a country I go to quite often. Yesterday I seen, this is through Facebook. And of course the police, I have one of the police Facebook pages there for that city. I keep it so I can see what goes on in that city just to kind of be aware. And there's a lot of danger in this city. And they had these two little boys that were selling apples on the street corner. This city is very poor, extremely poor. And they're selling apples. And they were trying to ask people, do you think this was right or not right? The police had come, took the two boys, and told them you're not allowed to sell apples. Now, the reasoning were, one, you don't have masks, and two, you're just handing these out to people, and you're dealing with people without masks, and you could spread COVID everywhere. So I think there's legit concern there for those children of what's taking place. The children, on the other hand, their comment was, would you rather us go stealing or selling food? You know, so here you have children that are trying to work, and in this country there's no school going on right now, and parents are very poor. So you have children trying to sell apples to get money, and then you have police that tell them they can't, and both of them have legitimate concerns. Now, how do we bring a peaceful solution to this? That's the challenge that we are faced with every day in the peaceful solution, because who's right, who's wrong? Well, sometimes you have to realize that the police are right in saying what you're doing is pretty dangerous in this time. And the boys are right by saying, well, we're better off selling than stealing. Then what's the solution and what's really the problem? So think about that as we continue to go through this, because just telling someone they're doing something wrong doesn't fix a problem, and it doesn't mean it's wrong to tell someone you can't do this. Sometimes there's more to the problem than meets the eye. So continuing on here, it says, think carefully about these questions, because being a positive leader includes all of these and more. Now bear this in mind. Leaders are responsible for themselves and for those who look up to them. I can tell you, I got a search going on for those two boys because we're trying to give them a job right now. If they want to learn to be teachers, we can give those two boys great jobs. And they can be examples to other people, because when we get to responsibility, we'll talk about how it's better to teach a man to fish than to give a man a fish. You can feed him for a lifetime, or you can feed him for a day. But they'll see that there's answers to every problem, but they're much deeper than apples and street corners. Continuing on here, before we get to page 131, we'll need to turn back in our lesson plan. We'll need to turn back in our lesson plan to page 6, or to LP 6D, Procedure 6. LP 6D, Procedure 6. And we'll get started on this tonight. And it says, explain to students that just like a political or community leader, their character will also define how they lead. Have students read the section entitled, Be a Positive Leader, on pages 131 to 132, and What Leadership is Not, on page 133. Then allow students to read the scenarios and answer the questions on page 134. So once again, we're going to start here on page 131, and the reasoning to read all of these through. And when you get to page 134 to get feedback from your students, you're wanting to see if they've comprehended what we've talked about so far. And that's what you're doing as a teacher. You're continually evaluating in the classroom by having these discussions, and it always helps to engage. Never rush through the lessons with your students. Always have them engage. Listen to input from them. There's a lot of things children can offer. We've heard some really interesting things. We've had some some very exciting opportunities where we've got to go teach in some very historic high schools here in the United States. And it's always interesting to see how even many years later, you would think society fixed the problem. And I'm not talking about the one specific high school that we go to in Little Rock, which is a huge high school that led a lot of the desegregation. That is kind of the beginning point for it. And society would think, well, we broke through that back in the 60s. You can look in the news today and tell we haven't broke through anything. We're still going through the same problems. Just because we say we fixed it doesn't mean we have. And then you ask yourself, well, how do we know if we fixed it or not? By the outcome, right? By the outcome of what we see. Well, here on page 131, be a positive leader. And it says all leaders share specific qualities and skills. How many of these character traits and skills do you have? Now, of course, the word qualities is defined here as a distinctive attribute or characteristic posed by someone or something. Now, these qualities have to be developed. Remember what we read here at the very beginning on page 130 about being a born leader? Well, no, not a born leader. But we'll get into how leaders, as we progress through this, and of course we'll only begin into this today, and then we'll get into it through the next class. But these qualities have to be developed. And I want to pose a question to you right now about leadership and thinking of leadership. And you think about leaders, and we ask ourselves, we're getting ready to look at ourselves. We're not looking at this because notice it says, how many of these character traits and skills do you have? We're not reading here and saying, how many do your mom and dad have? How many do your grandparents have? How many does your teacher have? This is a self-examination for ourselves. But I want you to keep this in mind. Right, page 47, beside this, be a positive leader. Because going all the way back, remember, parents are leaders. And we talked about dysfunctional families and healthy families. And remember on page 47, we learned that, well, do you come from a healthy family or a dysfunctional family? And on page 47, we learned that, well, we're somewhere in between. Notice it says, are families either totally dysfunctional or totally healthy? Most families are somewhere in between. And that's pretty much with positive leaders in the world today. We see a lot of people making a lot of positive choices and leading people in positive things, but still we're working to develop to get that last part out of negativity that we all have. And we all have to examine ourselves and realize we all have negativity in us. And working towards getting that to become better, of course, just like families, if we find negative things that take place in our families, we work to make them better. We don't want to hurt those that are closest to us, but then we shouldn't want to hurt those who we've never seen. You know, as we talked about, when you look at the obituary where the people are listed in the newspaper or now on the internet, they only mean something to you, the names, if you know the person. And then sometimes we're kind of shocked. Oh, I didn't know they died. But all the names that we don't recognize, they don't really mean that much to us. Well, the peaceful solution is telling us that everyone we see, everyone we encounter should mean the same as the ones that we love the most that live in our own house. The person that's on the other side of the world we've never met should mean that much to us. Their lives should be just as important as the person that's sitting across from us that we can't imagine living our life without. Everybody should be that important. And we should work hard to bring that together. And that's what we're talking about with building these positive leadership skills. And that's what the author is truly putting forth in having care and concern for everyone. And here for the first specific trait we're looking at, it says positive leaders lead by example. And look what it says here. That's right. First, you must walk the walk and talk the talk before you tell someone else what to do. So that means we have to be educated. That means we have to value, imitate, and practice what it is we're doing. And we also have to become a role model. So if you have here, over for the side, put pages 73, and we've read that earlier, so we're not going to go back and read that again. That's the value, imitate, practice. But also write down page 71. Page 71 was entitled Mirror, Mirror, and it tells us how to become a positive role model. And it lets us know that, of course, it says a positive role model will motivate you to build a moral character. And he or she will be a moral person. And they're a person of integrity, as we went over earlier. So we want to keep that in mind because these positive leaders that we're looking to become, well, we have to find one first because we have to be taught to be a positive leader. And that could be from our parents, our school teachers, our guardians, or it could be just merely going to a peaceful solution class and looking and taking what we've learned and then apply it. With a peaceful solution, it's like, everybody wants their account to get bigger. When they got their account in the bank and they're building up their money, they want it bigger, bigger, bigger. And the more money I get, the better I'll be. And then, of course, it never gets bigger because they're spending it as fast as they can get it. It's, I got to have this. I wasn't able to save. I just had to have this. And then, as the author of The Peaceful Solution said one time, after you buy all this stuff, it's like, now I got to save up to buy a shed to put it all in. I got too much stuff. And it becomes no rhyme or reason to what we get. Well, character education is something, when we build up our character education accounts, it's hard to lose it. The more you share it, the more you use it, or like spending it, the more you use it, the more you fill it up. It never depletes itself unless you start making negative choices, unless you start doing things that bring harm to someone else, yourself, or the environment. That's what depletes your character account. But positive character and being a leader and walking the walk and talking the talk, and of course, by showing peers and being an example of how to practice self-control as well. These are things that build our character, and they actually add to our account. They build our reputation, as we spoke about earlier, that's on page 90. They build up that reputation to where we become a more trusted person. Looking here to the next step on page 2, or the next evaluation barometer that we're looking at here, it says positive leaders are respectful. And once again, the definition for respect is found on page 14, and it says they are respectful to authorities. Now think about that, respectful to authorities. Does that mean when a leader is pulled over that he's respectful to the policeman that pulls him over because they're the authority? Or does that mean that positive leaders, do they have people that are over them? Yeah, they sure do. They have guides and teachers. And they have guides and teachers. And they have guides and teachers. Every leader, every positive leader has a teacher. And in the peaceful solution, which is the peaceful solution, one thing that sets it apart from every other organization I think you see in the world today is every leader is also, every student is a teacher, every person. And the author of the peaceful solution will be the first one to tell you he's always a student. He's always learning, and then he's offering what he learned. He's always training, and of course teaching others to do so. And that's what everyone's job is to learn, to teach, and to guide. And it says that they are respectful to authorities, to their peers, and to themselves. Be aware, notice be aware, underline that if you don't have it underlined, be aware of someone who is in a position of leadership that is disrespectful to his parents, teachers, or any form of authority. And that can come in a very disruptive way, of someone intentionally telling you, hey, let's go do this. That's a leader. You see all the time where church leaders arrested, community leaders arrested. We see right now where senators and congressmen are being examined for doing some very explicit things with girls under the age of 18. All of these things are always in the news. Now, if it's in the news, it has to be true, right? If you read it on the internet, it has to be true. It wouldn't be on the internet if it wasn't. Well, how do you know whether it's true or not? Examine, as we said before, what is their end result actions bringing? If someone tells you that someone's a negative person, well, what are they doing? Are they promoting death, war, destruction, disease? That would be a pretty negative person. But if they're promoting moral character education, and if someone comes to you and tells you something negative about a person, examine, well, what is that person really doing? Are they building society up, or are they tearing society down? And what is the society to begin with? Remember, we'll get to that. We'll get to page 105. But page 105 is a page you always want to remember in the peaceful solution because it tells you what a society is and how it's governed by a body of laws. And those laws bring peace to the society. Those are laws of morality that we're speaking of. But we'll get to that as we move forward. Now here, the very last one we're going to cover is 3. And it says, positive leaders are responsible for their actions. The characteristic of being responsible is a combination of following through on your task and being responsible for your actions. It also includes not blaming others for your mistakes, but learning from them. And that's one thing that I know growing up, whenever something got broke and my father would ask who did this, the first thing I would do is look to see if my brothers were around. And of course, the one that got volunteered was the one that couldn't hear their name be said. And that was kind of the way it worked. You never wanted to accept because you knew there was a consequence coming from making a bad choice. But I learned later in life that, it was a lot easier to just say you did it and get it over with and learn to not do it again. And that's really what my father went through, was just trying to get us to not do it again. Whatever you do, just don't do it again. Learn not to do it. But here for responsibility, make sure you write down above it, page 17. Page 17, that way you can quickly turn back to where you can find the definition or the whole example of being responsible. That's what we have here in the peaceful solution. And on page 17 it says being responsible means to be accountable and answerable for your actions. You will be known as a reliable person when you do this. Also write down beside that pages 88 and 125. Pages 88 and 125, because these are our building points that we're building off of that we've covered so far in the unit. And page 88 is, of course, entitled Room to Grow. And that tells us how, being responsible and going through everyday decisions and these setting our mind in advance to try to overcome the obstacles, well, that's being a responsible person. A responsible person sets their mind in advance. And then, of course, page 125, in closing, on page 125, and we're speaking of being responsible and having this reliability and reputation. On page 125, of course, we started off this chapter here in the second paragraph by saying, whose responsibility, once again, let's go up to the let's look at the first paragraph and we'll get to that and then we'll close. It says, have you ever considered what the world would be like when you become an adult? Will technology have advanced so much that cars would fly and vacations could be taken on another planet? Will the effects of violence and crime ripple outward, causing fear, hate, and mistrust? Or the value of having a moral character stop the fighting wars? Will our society be better or worse? Whose responsibility is it to ensure a safe world for you to grow up in? So ask yourself that question. Whose responsibility is it to ensure that the world becomes a safer place? It's our responsibility. Each and every person is bound to that responsibility. If you're part of society, you're bound to help. You're kind of challenged with this, but you're upheld to that. It's a responsibility. It's an action we have to take. Either we help make it better or we're going to make it worse. So once again, in closing, the next class will be on 5/9. That's just in 4 days, and it'll be at 5:30. And we'll pick up from this section right here on the fourth step moving forward. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.